Hey guys, today's topic is no fear. So this has been coming up a lot in my life, this topic of no fear, in like 3 different ways. One, I'm going to be using that in my book. I'm writing a young adult fantasy book of a retelling of the story of The Princess and the Pea. And it's going to be a trilogy, and it's like kind of in the olden days, but not really. So one of the phrases that they're going to say is no fear instead of like no problem or no worries. I think it's a British phrase to say no fear, and I heard it on a British show. And so I was thinking about the topic of fear today for today's video, and then I was like, I was gonna call it no fear, and I was like, that's the exact phrase that I just wrote down, like noted. I'm going to be using this phrase in my book. So no fear is a topic that has come up in my life. I talked about it in my last video about how sometimes we can fear failure in 2 ways. Either because we're not going to be perfect, because we have perfectionistic tendencies and we're afraid of making mistakes, or because we see other people fail and we are like, wow, if they could fall, maybe I can fall. So fear has been a topic on my mind recently. And if you've ever read the book The Secret, or done any study of the law of attraction, they talk about how love is the opposite from fear. Love is all the way like as positive an emotion as you can get, and fear is the absolute negative. The Bible talks about this too when Jesus says, I don't remember where it is, I'm blanking out, but perfect love casts out all fear. And it wasn't Jesus, it was John. Yes, John says in 1 John, perfect love casts out all fear. So the opposite of love is fear, and vice versa. Just like the opposite of light and darkness, which really is an absence of light. So darkness is the absence of light, and cold is the absence of heat. In a sense, fear is the absence of love. First of all, of knowing that you're loved, and then also of loving other people and acting in love. There's a certain confidence that comes with loving somebody or something. And it's a big part of your identity. Like, loving is really a core, it's not a superficial emotion or feeling, it's a very core human experience kind of a thing. Whereas fear is a lot of times shadow, and that's my first lesson. I actually have an outline today. I'm gonna do lesson 1, 2, and 3 about fear. And the first one is we often fear shadows. A lot of times the things that we're afraid of are not really there, or we kind of build them up in our mind. For example, this happened to me today. I'm telling you, this is a theme in my life. So I was at the playground with my daughter Emma, and I see this lady with these 2 little kids, and I'm like, she was my boss 8 years ago for 1 summer when I worked in a greenhouse. And I was like, what? Why is she here? I have not seen her in 8 years. And we kind of had an awkward-ish relationship, so I was like, does she recognize me? Do I want to talk to her? And like, I know that she had like glanced in my direction and kind of was like looking at me kind of sidelong, but I wasn't sure why. Like I assumed she recognized me and didn't want to talk to me, or she was like judging me, or like, oh, that girl's here, or something like that. And that was not the case at all. But I didn't find that out until I stepped out to shed some light on my fear, to cast away those shadows and make them run away. So I had just been talking with Jay about the concept of no fear and how I wanted to do that for my video today. And I was like, oh no, I have to talk to her now, because I knew, first of all, recognize fear. Fear is useful. Like I said in my video last week, I use my previous videos as references all the time. But yeah, so watch all my videos. They're not that great yet, but if you go across the highway, like a really busy highway with lots of tractor trailers, it's okay to be afraid of getting hit by a car. That's a good kind of fear. But fear is a trigger. And you might not even call that fear. You might call that caution or wisdom. But when you do feel that flight or fight or flight adrenaline response, that is a trigger. It shouldn't be something that you keep manifesting over and over and dwelling on or internalizing. It's a trigger. So I noticed that fear and I was right away like, okay, I need to then do something about it. I think I'm going into my second point now, but Tony Robbins says, if I can't, I must. In other words, if you think to yourself, I can't do that, then that's the exact thing that you must do. You can't have something out there that you can't do. I know that sounds like cyclical reasoning, but you can't have that happen. So don't. So do something about it. So if you're like, oh, I could never be a public speaker, go after that. Take a class on public speaking. Don't let that thing be a block in your life, be something that's stopping you from living up to your fullest potential. I'm not talking about something stupid like I can't like flap my arms and float into the air or something like that. Like, you know what I'm saying? With those fear-based things, those emotional things, those things that you know you feel inside you, that's a trigger. Like, why do I think I can't do that? Go after it. So I did. I didn't go after it awkwardly, which in the past I've done at times. Like, all right, I'm just gonna do it. And it's like, okay, you could have done that more gracefully. So I waited until she was like nearby and the boys she was watching were climbing up the same ladder for the slide that Emma was. And I was like, hi, are you, and I said her name, from the place we used to work? She's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I worked there one summer. I'm Christina K. My real name's Christina. Do you remember me? And she's like, oh yeah. And like, I could tell she was like trying to place me. And I was like, so she wasn't recognizing me before and judging me and thinking all these negative things about me and like, oh, that's the girl that, whatever. Like, it's not like she had any problem with me, like, necessarily. I just assumed that, like, I don't know, we didn't have she was a little bit harsh, I guess you could say, or like, she just has like a, like, strong personality. So I just assumed that she was angry with me sometimes, but there was nothing that was like there. And she was really nice when I saw her and everything was fine. And there was nothing wrong. Like, you have to look at things realistically, and you can't always do that when you don't have the facts. And so then your brain tries to fill in all the gaps of the facts that you have, and it paints these pictures out of all the shadows, that there's these monsters hiding in these shadows. And you just shine the light and you're like, there was nothing, it's an empty corner. So face your fears, go after them, run after them. So lesson number 1, fear is often a shadow. Lesson number 2, chase your fears, face your fears. Figure out, how can I do the exact opposite of the thing my fear is telling me to do? Now, don't be stupid. Don't run across the highway because you're afraid of it. But anything that's stopping you from being who you want to become, becoming the best that you can be, if you're afraid of it, figure it out. Get past it. Yeah, here, let me show you my Dyna list for today. Eventually, I'm gonna just do screenshots. I'm not doing any editing of my videos yet, so I don't want to have to like do this later. Okay. Hopefully you can see that still today. Oh, there we go. There's the outline so far, right? Okay, so we've got lesson 1, we often fear shadows. Lesson 2, facing our fears makes them dissipate because they are shadows. Lesson number 3, don't be afraid to make mistakes. This was basically the topic of yesterday's video. Hang on one second. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. So you're not going to be able to learn and grow unless you try. And a lot of times we fear something because we're afraid of failing. Why are people afraid of public speaking? There's nothing inherently, I mean, it's a little bit nerve-wracking to have people staring at you. But like the reason behind that is because you think they're going to be judging you and laughing at you, or you're not going to be good enough, or you're going to say the wrong thing, right? So it's a fear of failure. If you think deeply enough, why am I afraid of public speaking? Because I'm afraid of failure. Okay, then get really good at public speaking and practice it by doing it more, because you're probably not making the mistakes you think you are. And the more you do it, the more that your life is going to actually prove to you that the opposite of what you think is true. Like when I went out and talked to that woman. the opposite of what you're thinking is true. The opposite of what you're fearing is actually the truth. So you get up and you do a decent job public speaking because you took that public speaking class. And then you do it again, you do a good job, and you do it again, you do a good job. Your life experience is gonna tell you that your fears are unfounded. So just do it. And hey, you make a few mistakes the first time that you do it. I mean, I actually liked my first video pretty well. I didn't like my second video very much. And then I watched it again this morning and I was like, it's not that bad actually. But it doesn't matter. I'm filming another video today and I'm gonna learn from my mistakes, but I'm also not gonna try to like super hypercriticalize myself. That's probably not a word, but yeah, like even that. I see people do that a lot. Like they talk down on themselves because they're like, oh, that's not a word. Don't judge me. I know that's not a word. Like, I already know that's not a word, so you can't write in the comments like, oh, that's not a word. Why would anybody even care? Like, we're so harsh with ourselves. We're harsher with ourselves than other people are of us. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like, just try it. Just go after it, because the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, right? So the way to stop fearing and to break that cycle of fear is to go after it and burst that bubble and shine the light on the shadows and make everything bright and be like, okay, there was nothing there in the first place. And the only way you're gonna do that is to try. So that's my encouragement to you guys today. Try. Do what you know you need to do. Think deeply, figure it out. Figure out the root of the fear. Figure out the true action step that you need to take, and then do it. You know what's right for you. You'll figure it out. Think deeply and be brave. Love you guys. Bye.